A few years ago, we posted a blog, AES128 versus AES256 encryption. What's the difference? To date, this has been our most popular page. In answer to the question, what's the difference, we stated practically nothing. That is because 128-bit encryption is pretty strong, and being a magnitude stronger may not make you that much more secure, given that it's rarely the encryption that's the weakest link, and therefore rarely the part that gets attacked. However, since we wrote the blog, quantum computing has come closer and is now a real possibility within the next few years. For this reason, we thought it was worthwhile revisiting our blog to see if this made any practical difference between 128 and 256-bit encryption. Here, our CTO and co-founder, Dr. Andy Lilly, explains the difference in this short video clip. So, hello, Andy. In just a few words, can you tell us what AES is and what are the main differences between 128-bit encryption and 256-bit encryption?
Yeah, sure. So AES is an encryption algorithm. It's very widely used. It's specified in the sense that FIPS publication 197 specified it back in 2001. It won out basically in competition with a number of other potential algorithms. It's a symmetric key algorithm. What that means is the same key is used both to encrypt and decrypt the text, the plain text, to turn it into a ciphertext and then turn it back again. It can encrypt just about anything. It encrypts blocks of data, and the key length, the number of bits in the key, determines the strength of the encryption to some degree. Now, the only complication there is that with a symmetric key, because you can use it for both the encryption and the decryption, you do need to somehow get that key from one end to the other. And normally that's done using some form of asymmetric encryption, which people may be more familiar with the term sort of public-private key pairs and things like that. So there's various mechanisms for getting that symmetric key safely between the recipient and the original sender.
Okay. And so what are the main differences between the 128 and the 256-bit encryption?
Put simply, AES256 uses a longer key, but what that means is that the encryption isn't done in one go. It goes through and cycles through blocks of data. They talk about rounds, so 10, 12, 14 rounds, and bits of the key are used for each of those rounds. So the 256-bit algorithm is actually a slightly different algorithm to the AES128. Is there a great deal of difference? No, it's all AES at the end of the day.
If 128-bit encryption is strong enough, why would people need 256-bit?
Okay, so people often talk about the difference between 128 and 256-bit, talking about is one of them better, meaning does it basically protect your data better? Does it make it significantly more difficult for an unauthorized party to access your protected data? People often talk about 256-bit as being military-grade encryption, but this is slightly misleading. It just happens that certain bodies around the world have suggested that 256-bit would be better to use. Really, the length of time that it requires to actually brute force a 128 or 256-bit key at this time is well beyond any current computing processing capability. We're talking about hundreds, thousands of years worth of processing to brute force something. So realistically, is 128-bit adequate to the moment? It is for the moment, yes.
Okay, so are there any downsides to 256-bit encryption over 128-bit?
So I guess what I'd first of all say is people shouldn't get too hung up around the number of bits in the key. Yes, 256-bit encryption is stronger. Is it going to get cracked? Is 128-bit going to get cracked anytime soon? Probably not. And the thing that people often forget is that the chain of security that you're using with encryption is only as strong as its weakest link. So people should really be worrying about the holistic solution, i.e., are you protecting, the key that's passed from one end to the other? Is that done safely? Is the software written correctly? If it's written incorrectly, if you put a cryptographic key into AES256 that's all zeros, that's no stronger than putting an all zero key into AES128, i.e. it's awful security. So if the underlying software is written badly, if people don't understand, how to generate keys, if they don't understand the need for randomness as part of your security system, even what type of AES you're using, because there are different types of AES, whether it's sort of block modes or GCM, things like that, which have different uses for different types of data. So there are some technicalities around AE256 which are actually less well designed. To quote, the key schedule is pretty lousy compared to AES128. What does that really mean? In a few edge cases, which are often the places that crackers are trying to sort of, brute force things, then the decryption time 256 may only be 100 times more than AES128, rather than billions and billions of times greater.
Okay, thank you for that. So there's a lot of talk about quantum computing and that it's nearly with us. Whether nearly is just a few years or just a bit longer than that is down to conjecture. But when someone develops a working quantum computer, what difference will that make?
So quantum computing, when it gets to a scale that it can really be used for crypto brute forcing, it has a much more dramatic effect on the asymmetric keys that I was talking about earlier. So the sort of mechanisms that we use at the moment for assigning things to prove that it came from the right person, or for negotiating that symmetric key, between the sender and the receiver. Effectively, quantum crackers would be able to reduce asymmetric keys to being practically worthless. And that's why there's a lot of research from groups such as our own National Cybersecurity Centre, the NCSC, and worldwide, working on how to look at better algorithms. So lattice-based or whatever. There's a number of options there, in much the same way that AES went through a competition to, for the US and international bodies to decide what was best. So these anti-quantum or quantum-proof, cryptographic mechanisms are going through the same sort of competition at the moment, but they're still a few years away from deciding which are the best. When we come to symmetric algorithms like AES, there are some specific mathematical applications from quantum computers that can weaken them. So effectively, something called Grover's algorithm is an example. It effectively halves the length of the key. By that, I mean something that was encrypted with AES256 now becomes as easy to brute force as if it was 128-bit AES. Obviously, that also means 128-bit AES is weakened to the degree of effectively being like a 64-bit key. Now that does start to become a concern if you're working in, top secret type data. For most commercial, financial, and other aspects, it's a potential hazard, but it's not critical. Whereas national security, at top secret, are the sort of things that you really want to be safe for at least 30 to 50 years. Even if those quantum computers are only available in, say, 10 or 20 years' time, the danger is that people are currently recording the top secret traffic and hoping that in 10 years' time they will then be able to crack it using quantum computers and some of these things like Shor's algorithm or Grover's algorithm. So what does that mean for day-to-day use? It means AES128 or 256 are both, perfectly usable. Is anybody going to be bothering to record my personal messages so that they can try and crack them in 20 years' time? I don't think so.
Thank you. So is there anything that organisations should be doing today to protect their their sensitive information in the future? Is there anything they can do?
Like I said, I think, yes, they should be looking to the future. Yes, they should bear in mind that at some point there will be quantum resistant cryptography that they should consider. They need to be slightly careful that the whole quantum space has a certain amount of hype around it, and so not be fooled into thinking that now's the time to suddenly go off and spend, millions of pounds on new algorithms. Until they've been approved by international bodies, you probably don't want to touch these things. Because you want things like cryptography to be standards based so that they are proven and also interoperable. So I think for now, I would simply say people need to take that holistic approach. I would worry less about whether something has AES128 or 256 than if it was using, for example, some form of proprietary crypto algorithm, which is always dangerous because it's not standards based, and so you can't be sure of just how strong it is. And also making sure that if you're looking at cryptographic products, that you get them from trusted companies, ones that know how to work in the security space, because then hopefully you are getting that holistic view. Every link in your security chain will be equally strong, and hopefully that company can tell you where the weakest links are, if there are any. Whereas an awful lot of companies that you see on the web will simply say, use terms like military grade encryption. Well, you could say that, your standard web browser is encrypted with military grade encryption if it happens to be using, set to use AES256 when you're going off and using a website. So, these terms can be very misleading. So look for a trusted security company producing things that actually has, a background, and probably, certification like ISO 27001 and things like that.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very enlightening and put our minds to rest to some extent. Thank you.
No problem.
Here's a quick overview of AES and the points that Andy just made. AES allows rapid encryption and decryption with a single symmetric key. This key is often shared between sender and receiver using asymmetric key mechanisms. 128-bit AES encrypted data should be safe for the next 20 years. As stated by the US cryptographic experts at NIST, it's fine for anyone not working on top secret stuff. Security is a chain, and AES is probably one of the strong links. Weaker links are far more likely to be your people, your processes, or the rest of your software. Quantum computers will weaken both 128 and 256-bit AES. Far more importantly, they will render asymmetric keys, also known as public-private, essentially useless. For all of these reasons, be sure to get your secure communications from someone trusted, i.e. someone who already supplies secure comms to governments around the world.